Window is about to close in terms of your window of choice if you definitely want to join us in 2025. And let me just kind of say, first of all, a little bit about why you might want to join us. Now, the obvious thing here is people who want to learn more effectively, use their brain more efficiently, deal with overwhelm, deal with stress, deal with confusion. The amount of data that people have coming at them is ever increasing, yet the capacity to deal with that data isn't necessarily something people learn about. So those are some of the obvious things in terms of why people would join us for the photo reading workshop. So in terms of what is it, photo reading is an accelerated reading and learning technique and system. Basic premise: how to get through written information at 25,000 words per minute, get through whole books in 5 minutes, and then learning strategies to remember and recall what you've read. So if you think about that in terms of the average reading speed, it could be anything as low as 425 words per minute, even sometimes 236, depending on the country and etc. But less than 500 words per minute is the speed at which people typically read. And with the photo reading, we're starting at 25,000 words per minute. So just that alone is a game changer in terms of how you interact with written material, be that books, reports, PDFs, emails, you name it, it's all in there, online, Kindles, all the rest of it. So in terms of how it works, it's basically 5 steps. The steps are very, very simple. Step 1, where you get yourself physically and mentally prepared. Once you know how to do that, you can do that in about 30 to 60 seconds. Step 2, your preview, 60 to 90 seconds, so minute and a half. Step 3, the photo reading step, that takes about 5 minutes to photo read a book from start to finish. And your typical size book is what we're talking about. Of course, if you've got a great big medical tome, I've had doctors and surgeons, etc., attend the workshop. There are ways that you'll structure that slightly differently, but for a typical size book, about 5 minutes. Step 4, your post view. They say approximately 5 or 6 minutes. In terms of the workshop, I always kind of suggest that people do 2 or 3 minutes. And then step 5, your activation step. You can activate in just a couple of minutes, and that's your longer activation. Let's just say you're a student, you're doing exams, you want more depth of information. If you're just about to go into a meeting or go live on camera to do an interview or run a workshop or do a podcast or whatever it might be, 5 minutes of activation could be enough for you to show up and be competent in what you're talking about. And also, one of the things that I would say is the cherry on one of those, there's lots of cherries on the photo reading cake, but being able to get into the flow state is one of them. Because for those of you who do speak in public, whether that's being on stages or running meetings and leading a team, whatever it might be, speaking to your community groups, it all requires the same type of skill set. Being able to be in flow and have that left and right brain integration is absolutely essential for being able to remember and recall what you want to say, and say it with a sense of ease and flow. And once you do that, I always say the benefits go way beyond photo reading. I've got someone at the moment doing a photo reading coaching program. So it started off kind of not skeptical in a negative way, because if that was the case, I would never have taken them on as a client. But just sort of, I'm not sure about this. And now we're at the stage where yesterday we did a session and we were talking about something, and they remembered a memory from 10 years ago, because they were getting hung up on the mechanics of what we call activation, which is step 5. And so they then had several instances of what we call spontaneous activation, where you tap into, I almost describe it like your neural network, where something happens, a conversation starts here, it activates the neurology, and suddenly a memory that's buried here that you've not thought about for 10 years, however it's relevant to the conversation, bang, comes top of mind and you quote it perfectly. So they had several instances this week of spontaneous activation, which is wonderful. And that is what happens when you get that left and right brain integration, when you get yourself into the flow state and you are organized and structured in terms of how you deliver the information to your neurology, rather than the usual haphazard approach that people have. So even if somebody starts right at the beginning of the book and then sequentially goes through every single page, the mechanism within that is still pretty haphazard in terms of the way your mind and your brain and your neurology receives that information. So that's kind of photo reading in a nutshell. And I've had everything, of course, students, people who are studying for exams. I've had professionals, they're working in an organization, they want to next level their skills, they maybe want to get a promotion, or they just want to keep up to date with what they're doing. And I've had coaches, trainers, consultants, doctors, surgeons, accountants, marketing specialists. I've even had a team of rocket scientists from Cranfield University. I've had engineers, computer scientists, crystal healers, you name it, all of the above and then some. I've actually should actually maybe one day compile a list. This March, if you're watching this in real time, is going to be my goodness, my 23-year anniversary of becoming a photo reading instructor. I completed my photo reading instructor training with Dr. Paul Sheely in March 2002. So I flew out to Minneapolis to study with him. So that's a little bit of a summary, what photo reading is, how it works, yada, yada, yada. And at the moment, I'm setting the date for the 2025 class. If you know you definitely want to attend, what I'm doing with people who have already pre-booked, I've emailed out the potential dates. I sent those out yesterday. And what I want to do is choose a date that everyone can do, because there's no point having people pre-register and then choosing a date that they can't make. So the premise is pre-book, we choose the date, and then that date with the remaining places goes out to the general public. And then it's a case of, can you make it, can you not? But if you would like to definitely join us for this this brain changer, and somebody was asking the other day how I got into photo reading, I probably wouldn't have given it a second look had it not been for the early onset Alzheimer's, because I was just diagnosed with what was thought to be early onset Alzheimer's in my 20s. And my doctor said there was nothing he could do for me. I was completely devastated. So I struggled along for many, many years. So when the photo reading brochure landed on my doorstep, because on my doormat, because they sent things out by post, and I opened up the leaflet and said, would you like to drink in information like you're drinking it in through a fire hose? Would you like to blast through information, learn strategies to remember and recall what you've read, show up, increase your professional skills, all that sort of stuff. And then it got to the 25,000 words per minute. That's when I thought, it's kind of American hype. So I didn't I was intrigued, but it's like, and then as things got progressively worse for me in terms of the things I dreaded at work was meeting someone in a corridor, and they said, oh, Marilyn, can you book me a flight to Kuala Lumpur, traveling on this day, coming back then? That was my worst nightmare, because in those days we didn't have mobile phones and all the rest of it. And I might have just been on my way to the bathroom. So I wasn't carrying my clipboard and my notes or my post-it notes or anything like that, because I knew that by the time I got back to my desk, I would have completely forgotten what they'd said. And they used to call my desk, some people used to call my desk the sunflower, because there were post-it notes all around it. So it basically looked like a sunflower. Or they'd come up and say, where am I on your list? Because I had a clipboard with a to-do list on it. So the way it came across, thank goodness, is that I was very organized, but actually that was my masking technique and my coping mechanism for quite literally having what I hear go in one ear, immediately come out the other, never to be seen again. And it was bad. So I had to just find ways to try and cope, to be a sort of functioning member of society. And I do distinctly remember the day where I realized how serious the problem was. I was at home with my then partner. I was sitting on the sofa. So in that, you walk into the living room, we had a window that fed onto the garden. And so the sofa kind of ran across the window, and the kitchen was technically behind me. So my partner was cooking. I was sitting reading the Radio Times. It's like a TV guide. And I was reading what was on that evening. I closed the guide, put it down, said, oh, do you want a hand of anything? And he said, oh, what's on? And he wasn't trying to interrogate me. It was a natural question. He saw me reading the Radio Times. So he just said, oh, what's on tonight? And I looked at him and I said, I don't know. And then I said, EastEnders. And again, he wasn't trying to be horrible. He just said, well, EastEnders is always on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, whatever it was. And I said, I know. And he said, well, what else? And I said, I don't know. He said, but and I said, I know. And I also had an instance where because I studied to be a chartered accountant at that time, and I would do little pencil markings, just at the beginning of a chapter to say, put the date. So for my revision plan, I can go, okay, I've been through this chapter once, twice, 0, 5 times, whatever. So I went straight into a chapter, didn't look at that first blank page. So I started reading it, plowed through it word for word, the usual laborious way that of course it works with, many of us have been through the educational system. It's just kind of hard when you compare it to something like photo reading. So I did the usual thing, waded through the chapter, and then I went to write in the date, and I saw that I'd already read it 5 times. However, when I was just sat and read it, I didn't recognize any of it. Nothing. It was like I'd never seen it before. So with these things compounding, I then went to see my doctor. I explained what was going on and all the rest of it, went through all the things, and that's when he said, it looks like you have early onset Alzheimer's. And I was in my mid-20s. This is not what you want to hear when you're at the start of your career, or hopefully at the start of your career. I was completely devastated. So I struggled with that for about 3 years, and then the photo reading landed on my doorstep. So I eventually forked out the money. It was about £300-400, which is a lot of money in 1998. And then I got the tapes, which are still behind me on the shelf. I keep them for nostalgia purposes now, not because I probably have a cassette player somewhere in the cupboard when I used to record my client hypnotherapy sessions. But so these are the tapes that I bought back then. So I forked out the money. I bought the cassette tapes. And then I did what people often do when they buy books, tapes, materials, courses, etc. It's not very much. I listened to the first couple and thought, this is never going to work. And then in the year 2000, so 2 years later, I'm on the NLP training, and the person who's running it is quoting names, dates, places, facts, figures, case studies, da 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 da. And somebody puts their hand up and says, "How do you remember all of that stuff?" And he said, "Oh, I photo read." He said, first of all, he said, "I read 20 to 30 books a month." I leant over to the person who is sitting next to me, who is now a very good friend of mine. Some of you know the lovely Gina Batt. And I said, well, clearly he doesn't get out much, because who on earth has the time to read 20 to 30 books a month? I actually didn't read that in a year. And I was studying to be a chartered accountant, and I was an academic and all the rest of it. So then, of course, the next natural question is, how do you do that? So he pointed to the back of the room, to the resource table, and he pointed to the photo reading cassette tapes, and he said, "I photo read." And that's when I was like, whoa, hold on there, buddy. I've got those tapes sitting at home gathering dust. And that's when I coined the phrase for myself. I'd never heard it before. It maybe existed before, but I said to myself, that is shelf development, not self-development, shelf development, because my bookshelves were getting more benefit from those cassette tapes by osmosis than I was. So I made a decision then to go home and listen to all of the cassette tapes. And rather than going, yeah, that sounds stupid, or yeah, that will never work, or yeah, I can already do that, I was like, listen to it with an open mind and just do what you're told. Just put it into practice, please, for the love of God. And within days, I started to notice some really dramatic changes. And within 3 weeks, the rest, as they say, is history. My mind and my brain were completely transformed, and I've not looked back since. And that was in October 2000. And when I did my practitioner training, I went from worst in class in terms of the open book test that I did at home, and I had several months to complete that test. I had all of the books, all of the notes, the big folders, they're still behind me on the shelf, all of the cassette tapes, and I struggled like you can't even begin to imagine. It was just a mess. And then 3 weeks later, having put the photo reading into practice, I went back and I did the master practitioner, which was a humongous amount of work. And I only had 2 weeks to do the whole massive test. And I was the only person who didn't have any corrections at all. Everybody went away with corrections, things I had to go and redo, take that test home, maybe take it home for several nights and get it remarked. Mine was completely done, hands down. And that was in the year 2000. And then in May 2001, I decided I was going to become a trainer of NLP. And that's a 3-week course, and it culminates in the final exam, which is a 1-day closed book exam. So exam conditions. I decided, rather than faffing about for 3 hours, faffing about for 8 hours, I was going to finish in 3 hours on the money. That was the goal I put in my future timeline. And I didn't revise in the traditional way. I photo read, mind mapped, did the activation techniques, the super reading and dipping, the skittering, the rhythmic perusal, all the rest of it, and then turned up to do the test. Didn't get off to a good start because somebody looked at me as I walked into the hotel in Kensington Olympia. I said, Marilyn, how do you do a submodalities belief change? And I looked at them and they looked at me, and I just burst into tears because I didn't know in that moment. So I ran to the bathroom. A friend of mine, Deborah, saw me. She came after me, said, what's going on? Is everything okay? And I said, I've been an idiot. I didn't revise. I just did the photo reading thing that David had talked about, because I've got the tapes at home, and I'm doing the Oprah ugly cry, because as people were coming in and flushing the toilet, I could hear my £5,000 going down the drain. Because even though I passed everything else up until that point, if I had failed the written exam, I would have failed the whole trainer's training course, and I'd have to do it again. And I was like, oh, gee, what have I done? So I go into the exam with my face all puffy. And I'm just really berating myself. Oh God, how could you been so stupid? What an idiot! Why didn't you just probably read it and do all the stuff? And then by the time I sit down, I have a little chat with myself, and I says, look, we've got a few options here. I can sit and cry all day, which will be very annoying for everyone else that's in the exam room. I could try and do this thing and just beat myself up and berate myself and yada yada yada, or I could do what I've been practicing at home about getting into state, the accelerated learning state, clicking into the left and right brain integration, activating the mind, doing those mental mind maps, and perform from that place and space. So I went for door number 3, and in a nutshell, I finished. Well, I didn't know I'd finished, but I handed in my paper. Nobody came back. So I put my hand up and I said to Sally Davies, I said, can I have the next paper, please? And she said, you're done, hun, as in you're finished, honey. And I was like, oh. So I'm looking around, and there are people who are still on their first paper. And I'm like, well, this can't be right. Now, you can't get all of your papers back, but you can get back the last paper. So I said, can I have that last paper back? Because suddenly I had this flashback. At that time, there was an episode of Mr. Bean with Rowan Atkinson. And if you've ever seen it, it's the exam scene. So I'll maybe try and find it on YouTube, and I'll put it in the link to the comments, the description of this video. It's the exam scene. So Mr. Bean is lining up all of his pens, and he's, looking around, and he's finished, and he's kind of finished, and he's looking around wondering why everyone else is still writing, and, feeling all smug. And then they announce there's like 30 minutes left before the end of the exam. And then he sees someone turn over the exam paper, and there are questions on the other side. And he realizes that he's completed all these exam papers, but not the second side. So he's literally only done half the exam, and he's got 30 minutes left. And then the papers are flying all over where the pens are going. And I suddenly had that Mr. Bean moment. As a pet friend of mine, Paddy, bought me the Mr. Bean doll, the Beanie doll, because I talked about this story. And I just had this massive, like, oh my God, what if the exam paper is double-sided, and all day I've only answered half the questions? There's pretty much no way I'm going to pass. So my heart is racing. Sally gives me the paper, and I look at it, and I was like, oh my God. And it's like, nope, I've answered all the questions. It wasn't double-sided. And so at that point, I was like, okay, then. I look at my watch, and 3 hours had passed. I'd finished 3 hours on the money. I was like, whoa, this is interesting. There were people who were still writing right up until 6 o'clock. So I went upstairs. There's a really nice restaurant. So I went upstairs about 45 minutes later. The next person to finish, Tim, came up. We had a chat. I went home. I ate the rest of the takeaway that I'd ordered the night before. I watched an episode of Columbo, and I'm like, okay, then let's see what happens here. And apparently behind the scenes, they're like, okay, who is Marilyn Devonish, and did she cheat? Because apparently my paper looked like I copied it out of the textbook, but they couldn't figure out how I'd done it in 3 hours. And I only left the room once to go to the bathroom, and one of the invigilators followed me and stood outside the cubicle. So they're like, well, we can't prove she's cheated, so we're going to have to give her the benefit of the doubt. She's passed. And there was somebody in the room who heard me tell this story on one of my photo reading workshops. And they said, Marilyn, I was in that room with you that day, and you kind of almost nearly made me fail the exam, because she said she watched me leaving and I was so calm. She said I glided out of the room. And so she's then thinking, hold on a minute. Because sometimes people leave an exam early because they can't do anymore, they don't know what to do, so they leave in a stressful, upset, distraught state. She says you were so calm and so just serene and relaxed. She said you left the room just gliding. So she's then going, hold on a minute, what the hell is happening here? How is she already finished and she's just like sauntered and glided out of the room, and here I am still writing? So she said it kind of messed with her head a little bit initially. Now, of course, she did pass. She's a great trainer as well. But it was just interesting years later to hear someone who was there relay their perception of that scenario. But the only thing I'd done differently is applying the photo reading, and also looking at my mindset, my approach to things with the NLP and the hypnosis and the timeline therapy, etc. But that key component, putting those 5 steps actually into practice, it was an absolute game changer. So with all of those things happening and the miraculous things that were happening in the room when I was interacting with other people, and people starting to say to me, God, how do you know that? How do you remember that? I'm like, oh my God, that was me sitting in the room in October 2000 watching Paul Vernon work the room, because he was the lead coach. And I was like, oh my God, I wish I could be like Paul one day, where somebody poses a question, they ask me a question, and I just answer. I just have the information, like bang, 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 rather than what I was like, where I could be waiting several weeks, months, or years before the information I'm looking for shows up. And suddenly I realize I am a version of Paul Vernon, where I am the person in the room who everybody is asking questions of. And I'm just like, bang, 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 bang. And I'm like, whoa. And that's when I then thought, I want to learn how to teach other people this skill. So that's the potted summary of what photo reading is, how it works, the steps, the processes, ways that you can use it. I always say it goes way beyond reading. I had a client who is a mathematician. So he's a maths teacher, has done a degree, MSc. When we worked together, he was doing his maths PhD. Very busy life, had a family, young children. And I said to him, what's the most relaxing thing that you do? And he said, photo reading. And I was like, okay, let me rephrase that. He maybe hasn't got what I'm asking. So I rephrased, and I said, no, in terms of relaxation and, meditation, and and he said, photo reading, because it is about being in that state of relaxed alertness. So even if you have got to go through tons of material, you're preparing for an exam, you're preparing for an interview, you just want to deal with the overwhelm of daily life, you're feeling stressed up to the eyeballs, photo reading is like a Zen-like state, and that will serve you well in whatever it is you are doing, wherever it is you're going. So when I do those live TV interviews, those live radio interviews, often with pretty much no time at all, I'm using that photo reading state to get me ready. And even sometimes the interviewer will tell you, if I'm doing a podcast or something like that, they'll say, oh, roughly going to do this, that, and the other. After time, I'm not even really listening, because I know darn well that there'll be things that come up that are not anticipated, because the interviewer will say something, or I will say something that will take us in a different direction. And that's one of the reasons people don't like public speaking, they don't like presenting, they don't like doing interviews, they don't like doing podcasts, they don't want to do media, they most certainly don't want to do live television and live radio, because you don't necessarily know what is going to come up, what people are going to ask you, and people are afraid of that rabbit in the headlights, or burbling, or just saying the wrong thing. And photo reading is an absolute game changer for all of that, if you're doing anything in that particular realm. But I always say it goes way beyond reading, in terms of accessing your creativity, your decision-making skills, your critical thinking skills, meditation, relaxation, flow state, intuition, synchronicity. Even when I do my kind of intuitive readings, the tarot readings, the Huna, the access consciousness, and people say, oh my God, you're channeling, because I will say exactly what they're thinking. or I'll say a phrase that I wouldn't necessarily use in my daily life, but it comes into my head and it's the exact phrase they use. It's almost like I hear it from them. There's an element of photo reading that is going on there in terms of the way I prepare for those and the state that I'm in when I deliver those sessions. So for those of you, let's say we're in a more spiritual field rather than academic or work, it's really fascinating for that as well. But anyway, I shall leave it there. If you would like to join us for the 2025 class, going to be in the next few weeks, as I said, I sent the dates out. I've sent about 10 dates that we can kind of be flexible with and choose from. The link, if you want to just book, is the bit.ly link, bit.ly/photo reading workshop Z or Z. The main website, if you just want to kind of take a look at the background of photo reading, what some of the testimonial videos, download the photo reading brochure, etc. That's my main website, transformationstm.com. So that's TRANCE, F for Freddie, so FORMATIONS.com/photo reading. And kind of guess one of the other things that people always ask about age-wise, I've had clients and students from age 7 to 70 plus attend the workshop. So this is from one of the 11-year-old attendees who says, Marilyn, you helped me so much being a better person, feeling better about myself. What a gift to give to someone who's just at the start of their life, that they build confidence in themselves, they access their skills and abilities, they learn about their learning styles, they know how to utilize them. And I've had students with dyslexia, dyspraxia, and all of that sort of thing. And within hours, that's handled, not an issue anymore, and now they're just getting on with the business of learning, which is what it's all about at that age. I've also had, let's see what we got here, a team of rocket scientists from Cranfield University. So I ran a bespoke workshop, a corporate workshop, photo reading workshop for them. And I did a smorgasbord summary of the feedback from the feedback forms. And they said it was stimulating, valuable, highly recommended, professional, excellent, enlightening, fun, relaxing, motivating, time well spent, and should be given to all first-year PhD students. That was a team of rocket scientists. Trust me, when you work for the MOD and you're in the army and you're at that level and you're a chief scientist and a rocket scientist, you know how to learn. So some little whippersnapper like me rocking up and saying, yeah, we're going to do a course on accelerated learning. At first, it was a bit like, really? So that was very interesting in terms of how that one played out. This is the wonderful Naomi Tamayama from Mad Dog Design. She's currently having a sale on her crystals. Check them out. I saw this post on Facebook, said, Naomi, can I quote you? She's like, yeah, sure. And she said, I've spent less than an hour reading 8 books on a topic and have just compiled a piece of work from this. Game changer, real life skills. Now, Naomi is a single mother and an entrepreneur running several businesses. So for those of you, even if you're not a single parent, but you've got kids, you know how busy that can be. Just imagine less than an hour to photo read 8 books and compile a piece of work from that information. That is no joke. So, that's absolutely amazing. There was another one here. Let me see if I've kind of got that. That's the one I'm looking for. So let me do that, and that. So this is one I received a Facebook message from someone a couple of years ago, out of the blue, hadn't spoken with them for years. They said, hey, Marilyn, hope you're well. Sorry to just land into your email, your inbox, but I just wanted to share this with you. They said, I've changed paths. I'm now practicing law, and thanks to photo reading, it gave me the confidence to read a lot of material in a short time and retain it. And they then said, those law exams are no joke. Just imagine an investment of just 2.5 days of your time gives you the skill to get through 8 books in 1 hour, gives you the confidence to go for one of the toughest professions in terms of the rigors of the academic reading and learning and the exam process you are required to go through. 2.5 days. I cannot think of many other things where you will invest just 2.5 days and get these kinds of results. So photo reading is amazing. I could go on and on and on and on and on about all of the wonderful ways that photo reading can change your life, because when I say it's a game changer and I say it goes way beyond reading, and I have had people come to the photo reading workshop and kind of get angry with me because they'll come and they'll go, why don't you tell me this is what it was? I had no idea all of this is covered in photo reading, because it's almost like a a personal development, spiritual development, self-empowerment, brain training workshop all rolled into one. And because we're teaching accelerated learning, it is structured in an accelerated learning way. So when I had the medical doctor and trainee neurosurgeon attend the workshop, he said to me on the first night, which was a Friday, because, you know, depending on how structured, we did Friday evening, then Saturday, Sunday. And on the first night, he came up and he said, have you seen the movie Limitless? And at that time, I hadn't seen it. Bradley Cooper, Robert De Niro. And I said, no, I haven't seen it. I said, why? And he said, you are doing everything that's in the movie. The only difference is we don't have to take a dangerous silver pill and you're not time shifting. I was like, oh, cool. I'll check it out. So and then he comes back on the Sunday and said, I take that back. And I went, what, Dr. Koss? And he said, you are time shifting, because I cannot believe how much information we have covered in this 2.5 days, how much people have learned and how far everyone has come. And then some of you will know that for a full year, 12 months after that, Dr. Koss and I met every single Sunday. So it usually a phone call. But times we meet up in London over dinner, but we talk for at least an hour, sometimes 3 or 4. He would talk about neuroscience. I would be talking about personal development, and then he's explaining that how the neuroscience underpins what I'm doing and gives some explanation to how it works. But there were so many times where I say, so Dr. Koss, this happened with this particular client. How will you explain that in terms of neuroscience? And you just smile or laugh and go, Marilyn, science hasn't caught up with you yet. So it was absolutely fascinating. And that culminated in me hiring a cinema in London at the One Aldwych. It's a lovely hotel. They got a private cinema in the basement. It sounds a bit weird. It's a really lovely basement, trust me. Really lovely cinema. Very posh, you know, big. It's like these big space age chairs. And when we arrived, somebody, you know, had glasses of wine or fruit juice and the canapes and all the rest of it. So hired it. I showed the movie Limitless. Let me just say up front, you cannot just take a commercial movie and show it in a commercial setting. They will come and they will find you. So I wrote to the film company. I explained what I wanted to do. They granted me a license to show the movie Limitless. So we showed the film. Dr. Koss talked about the neuroscience side. I talked about the brain training and the personal development and the esoteric side. And we then watched the film together and we had a discussion around it. Let me see if I can find, if I can't find it, we shall just bring it to a close, because I've had One Aldwych, 5-star luxury champagne screening room. I think that's the one I'm looking for. So I will show you before we go. I'll show you, because when I say the basement, it makes it sound a bit like grungy. It really isn't. So there we go. So I'm going to do that, and close that one down. There we go. So that's the One Aldwych. When I say in the basement, it's in the basement because that's the darkest bit part of the building. There are no windows for obvious reasons. But yeah, when you come in, it's wonderful. Somebody to serve us the canapes and serve us the drinks and all the little wonderful things. So yeah, it was very, very cool. But I did that with Dr. Koss Fantis, who, as I said, was studying to be a neurosurgeon, because he was just so blown away with the way that photo reading works. So I'd love to have you come and join us. Now, if you've watched this, thank you very much. And also you might think, yeah, it's not really what I'm looking for. Now, I have got somebody who's retired, actually, is going to be joining us. And they said, because they want to prepare for retirement, and also thoughts about the brain, Alzheimer's, dementia, diminishing memory, your mindset, keeping those neurons intact. So they're actually booking it because they're retiring and they're thinking about the next phase of their life, whereas somebody else has booked on because they're thinking about their career and what's next for them. So it's a really interesting juxtaposition. However, if it's not something that you're particularly interested in, but you know people who could be interested, please feel free to share this link with them. Share the link to the main website, transformationstm.com/photo reading. Share the direct link. And if you're booking in the next couple of days, when you book the in-person workshop, you get the full 3-day online on-demand video webinar workshop, which is £850. If you purchase it separately, you get that as a free bonus. which means you don't, while you're waiting for the date of the photo reading workshop to come around in the calendar, it means you can get started as soon as today. And you also then have it as a resource, so you can use it to deepen your photo reading skills. You can also use it if there's anything on the course that you want to refresh, where of course if you come just to the in-person workshop, once it's over, it's over. You've got your notes to rely on. However, if you're kind of booking in the next few days, then you'll have the video webinar workshop where I ran that with an audio, an online studio audience. So I'm answering the questions that they're answering in the chat, and you get that interaction with that as well. So that will be your bonus. As I said, you can book it separately, particularly if you're abroad and you're watching this, Australia, America, Canada, across Europe, wherever you are, or Scotland or somewhere in the UK where you can't easily get to Watford, which is 20 minutes on the train from London Euston. Then you can purchase that outright. So it's £850, which is about $1,100, but you'll get that for free if you're booking the in-person workshop in the next couple of days. So thank you for watching. Thank you also to those of you who have come through the photo reading doors over the years, because without you, none of this is possible. And also thank you for those who have watched this and shared it or given it a thumbs up and a like. So yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I look forward to working with you either virtually or in person for the next photo reading accelerated learning workshop. My name is Marilyn Devonish, the NeuroSuccess coach from transformationstm.com. I'll catch you later, and I'll see you soon if you're joining us for the in-person photo reading workshop.